Okay, I hope that on the wiki that you got some insight from your fellow students about um, some of the different contours of what spiritual direction is. Um, but allow me to give you the definition that we will be oriented around for the duration of our studies together. The goal of spiritual direction is to assist people in becoming more intimate with the divine. Now, intimacy is personal language. In more abstract terms, we're talking about people's sense of connection to a larger self. So, for theists, people who believe in a conscious and an active form of deity, this looks a lot like intimacy, and so intimacy is an extremely useful metaphor. For non-theists, this might look more like identification with the larger self, whatever that larger self is for the person in question. And of course, these are not mutually exclusive ways of viewing it. For one thing, in non-dual thought, personal and impersonal are just two sides of the same coin. As the Buddhist teacher Dogen says, to study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to become intimate with all things. So again, intimacy. Personal and impersonal understandings of divinity. Intimacy and identification. Two sides of one coin. So a large part of this work involves encouraging people and supporting them as they break out of ways that they held spirituality in the past. Sometimes these take the form of unhelpful or damaging beliefs. And they want help reframing them in ways that are liberating and helpful for them. We also try to identify people's sense of resistance to this intimacy or connection with the larger self. Because, intimacy is always scary. And so that resistance comes in a lot of forms and is not always immediately evident to us. Spiritual direction is deep work. It unfolds over time as we discover layer upon layer upon layer of thoughts and beliefs and feelings and, yes, resistances. Because only when we become aware of our resistance can we, really work to overcome it. So in spiritual guidance, we are concerned with one thing and one thing only: fostering intimacy or connection with the divine. And this is what differentiates this practice from psychotherapy. Therapy is about identifying, neurotic impulses and eradicating those so that a person can have healthier interpersonal relationships or have a less painful or stressful life. And I know that's an oversimplification. It's also about inner exploration, and I am a big fan. I have been in therapy for more than 30 years, and it has been life-saving. but it's also kind of focused on problems. Um, but in spiritual direction, we don't assume that anyone who comes to us has a problem. Um, most people who come to us just want to feel closer to the divine, or they want to be more intentional about their spiritual practice. Now, people may come to us and present with a problem, but we don't assume that people are coming in with a problem. Now, it could be that someone who comes to us has difficulty being intimate with the divine because of a psychological problem. So this is a slippery slope, and we've got to be very careful of this. So, and we need to be clear that having a certificate in spiritual direction doesn't qualify us to do psychotherapy, in any way, shape, or form. So, we don't want to be unethical. We don't want to be sued for malpractice. So we don't go there, unless you're already a therapist. It's something we draw a bright line around. And I know at this point it may be kind of unclear where that line is, but it will become clearer as we go along. The fact is that we're not here to fix people. We are here to walk beside them. We're here to bear witness to their relationship to the divine. And we speak what we see, but we don't try to fix anything. We can offer suggestions, we can reframe things, we can be supportive, we can name resistance when we see it. We can speak about what we notice, but we're not therapists. And helping people, overcome psychopathologies, that's not our job. Now, it might be that you will have a client, and if you do this work for any length of time, you definitely will have a client for whom it is very obvious to you that he or she would benefit a great deal from therapy. So that's an okay thing to say, It's perfectly acceptable for you to say, I will be glad to work with you as a spiritual director, but I need you to commit to being in psychotherapy as well. And if they refuse, you will need to stop seeing them until they do. Drawing boundaries with clients is always hard, but this is really for your own protection. A lot of people come to spiritual direction because, well, let's face it, they think it's cheap therapy, but it's not. And it's very easy to slide into therapy territory. So we have to be really on guard against that. And in fact, we might need to teach our clients where that line is, because many of them will be familiar with psychotherapy, and so they'll kind of automatically tend in that direction, and so we need to keep bringing them back to this center place of intimacy with the divine. It might also be that a person is so psychologically wounded that you can't work with them. And as we'll see in our studies, part of being a good spiritual director is knowing where your boundaries are, knowing what you can handle and what you can't. In my experience, a person who is too psychologically wounded won't be able to stay focused on their relationship with the divine. You'll find yourself being drawn again and again into conversations about their families or lovers or friends or a difficult relationship in their spiritual communities or at work or whatever. It's really your job to hold the line and to keep the focus on this one thing: intimacy, intimacy, intimacy with the divine. Now, sure, if the conversation strays, you'll need to give them some slack, because lots of things in our lives have bearing on this most important relationship. And, people often kind of wander off topic, but then they come back. And when they come back, they often come back with renewed insight. So, we need to give people some room to stretch there. In my experience, it's pretty normal for people to just kind of flit around and unpack a bunch of stray thoughts for about 20 minutes, and then at about the 20-minute mark, they hit something that's really important, and they go deep. That's not an unusual thing. And, maybe people just need to, sort the wheat from the chaff that's going on in their lives first. I know that's something that I need to do myself. So that's okay. But, when a person doesn't come back to their spiritual life, then we need to bring them back. And that's a skill that we'll be working on. Redirection. It can be done gently, and it can be done really fruitfully and productively too. So we'll be talking about some of the ways to redirect. But you'll also encounter plenty of people who just cannot stay focused because they simply have too many other problems to concentrate on what you're there to do. It's not your job to help those people because you're not a psychotherapist, unless of course you are. If you are not a therapist already, and you're not there to do therapy, then it really is your job to cut people loose when they can't stay focused on what you're there to do. We have to be very careful not to be tempted by our very sincere desire to help people. That empathy and compassion is so prevalent among spiritual directors, but it can also undermine what we're there to do. It can take us into therapy territory where, if we're not trained for it, it can be really damaging, both to us and to our clients. So we have to be very careful there. So, if you keep going into therapy territory, it might be good to ask your client to come back when they get the help they really need from somebody who is qualified to do it. Now, other aspects of this ministry are discernment and spiritual practice. Helping someone to discern the presence of the divine in their lives, that's something we're really, really good at. Too often people are too close to their own lives to see what the divine is up to. And our assumption is the divine is always up to something, because the divine is a sneaky cuss. And so in listening to the ups and downs of our clients' spiritual lives, their you know their everyday struggles. We as spiritual directors often have sufficient distance to see patterns that our clients can't. We can discern movement when changes have been too small for them to track from day to day. It's like how you don't really notice a child growing if you see them every day. But, for grandma who only sees them, once every couple months, the growth is obvious because she's not so close to it. Also, we can help our clients make discernments about life choices. Our culture really does not excel at giving people guidance or making their decisions from a place of groundedness or spiritual awareness, or from a place of alignment with one's spiritual values, or a sense of being connected with the divine. But helping people sort through those kinds of discernments, that's something that we do really well in spiritual direction. We can also suggest and help monitor people's spiritual practices and disciplines. Spiritual discipline is very important for a robust sense of connection with the divine. But again, we don't live in a culture that encourages this. People are often not well informed about spiritual practices from different traditions. And often it will occur to us that there is a spiritual practice that might be very helpful for our client, but it's not one that they're familiar with. So we can help with this. We can suggest disciplines or practices that are tailor-fitted to our client's needs because we've come to know them well. And we can also, if our client requests it, help to hold them accountable for these disciplines. Not in a mean schoolmistress kind of way, but at their request. A simple, so how is the meditation practice going? Can be very helpful to motivate them, especially if they know you're going to ask that question. And if they're doing it, that's great. And if they're not doing it, voila, resistance. Something to work on. Resistance is one of our favorite words. So I want to tell you the secret right now to doing spiritual direction well. And that is making a conscious connection with the divine at the beginning of the session, and then holding that connection throughout the session. It will change the atmosphere in the room. Not only that, it will help you get out of the way so that the divine can show up and do all of the work. So this is so important. People say, I don't know if I can do this. Right. You can't. The best that you'll be able to do is not hurt someone. Because, we're limited. But the divine is infinite. So there's an old saying in spiritual direction, speak only when spoken through. And that's really, really good advice. Which means sometimes there's a lot of silence. That's okay. Our culture has a lot of problems with silence too, and it will be tempting for us to fill that silence up. But that's something that we need to work on. Comfort with silence. Because sometimes silence and just being in the silence with another human being, sometimes just being with another person in the divine presence is exactly what your client most desperately needs. And so just being in the silence with your client is being a good spiritual director. So, the primary skills in doing spiritual direction are showing up, paying attention, connecting and holding a connection with the divine, and then trusting the divine to do the work. So I'd like to invite you to do a little guided meditation. Please close your eyes and find that connection with the divine. Reach out with your own internal sense of presence until you meet that bigger presence. And just let yourself be held by it, enveloped by it, bathed in it. And just enjoy that sense of divine presence. Allow yourself to feel the wonder of being in that presence and being held by that presence. And now I invite you to notice the place in your body where you feel that connection the most strongly. It could be in your heart. It could be in your arm. I always feel it most strongly in my right kidney, strangely enough. But find that place where you notice it more than any other. And focusing on that place, hold that connection. Keep that connection top of mind. Give yourself permission to trust it. To be held and loved by it. Let it be in you even as you are in it. And now I invite you to stand up and open your eyes just a little bit. Give them a soft focus. And at the same time, keep holding that connection. Hold that connection. And now, do some walking meditation. Keep your eyes open enough that you don't run into anything. Pay attention to your foot every time it touches the floor. And at the same time, be conscious of that connection with the divine. I invite you to put your hand on the place in your body where you feel that connection the most strongly as you walk. And I invite you to do this walking meditation for about 5 minutes. And the whole time, stay present. Notice every footfall. Notice the feeling of the floor under your feet. And notice that connection. And hold it. And savor it. And rejoice in it.